Welcome back. We're here at MJ Harrington and Company in Newport, right on Main Street. Joining me now is the owner and president of this company, David Lantz. Welcome.
Welcome to you, Lynn.
Thank you for hosting us.
Our pleasure.
The store looks marvelous.
We have done lots of changes over the last year or so, all to celebrate our 65th anniversary.
That's a great anniversary. We lost your dad this year recently, and this is a family business, 3 generations?
Well, kind of 2 and a half. His older sister started with her husband, and then Dad took over in 1970, and then Dad sold it to my brother Jeff and I in 1992. But has stayed in the family for all 65 years. So that makes it.
You don't see that anymore.
I feel very, very fortunate and blessed to have been part of something like this, because it is a unique situation to go kind of 2 and a half or 3 generations. It's not a very likely possibility when businesses start. So.
It's true, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the work that he did. He was a celebrated man in the community.
He was.
He did everything.
Oh, he was very involved, and whenever he believed in something, he jumped behind it 110%. And it all began with his philosophy about serving, and he served in the Second World War and was very proud of that. And while he wasn't on the front lines, he spent some time in Panama. He fixed equipment. He was a mechanic by trade. And he really enjoyed that component of fixing things and helping others. And that easily translated into his work here at the store. He was a watchmaker in his early career after going through watchmaking school on the GI Bill.
Okay.
And then he found he loved talking to people more than fixing watches. So although his bench in the early years was on the floor, right out where customers could talk to him and he could work, he realized he wasn't very efficient at the bench.
Because he was talking too much.
Exactly. Lots of conversation, which he loved.
Yes.
And so his job evolved into more of the ultimate salesperson. He loved to interact with folks, find just the right piece, whether it was a piece of timekeeping equipment or a piece of jewelry, and he just became so engaged both in the store and in the community for those nearly 61 years he was in the jewelry business. He was 1 month short of 61 years.
Yeah, well, and that's how you end up on committees. You talk to people and there's a need, and it seems like he was one of those guys who wanted to fill that need. Absolutely,
and his actions always spoke louder than his words. Someone would say, you know, we're going to be doing this, or we're thinking about this, and the next thing you know, he would have gathered some people together and formed a committee or become part of a committee, and off they went. And he had the good fortune of being in a business like this where lots of conversation went on, so it wasn't all bench work anymore. And so much of his time, kind of like what I've been accused of speaking a lot more than working at times, but it's all part of what we do.
Oh,
it's very much part of the business, and he was masterful at it. We'd send him to the bank, and he'd be back 2 hours later. And the bank's not very far from
here. You can walk there, yes.
But that was the way he was. He was just incredibly engaged in this community and loved everything he did.
Now, has the location always been here?
It actually shifted down here in 1981, I believe. He bought the building in the late 70s. It was an old bank, and it was a perfect location. And the original store was up the street where there's a quilt shop now. And they had been there since, I think, the 20s.
Oh, wow.
And so the previous owner's full 22 years of ownership, Mr. Downing, had been in that location, I believe. And then Uncle Mike and Aunt Phyllis were there the entire time they had the business. And then Dad decided to shift it down to this building, and we had half of this building initially, and then we took over when Bob's Sports Shop went out of business, and he retired in 1980, I believe. And so it's, we expanded to this side in 1994.
Okay.
But we were in this building on the other side with the vault in 1981.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful building, and I know that was part of your dad's legacy, was historic building preservation.
He loved that, and he just loved the community. He wanted to do anything he could to make the community more beautiful. And so when we did new sidewalks in town, he was one of the leaders that brought forth the brick sidewalk. And so the bricks were laid up and down Main Street. And he was one that said, listen, each one of us can do our part. Let's make this happen. And the town jumped on board. And it really makes for a very quaint, very beautiful downtown.
Oh, sure. Downtown is the lifeblood of a small city like Newport, yeah. And if he was a patron of the arts as well.
Absolutely. He encouraged us to support the areas that needed the most support. So the arts, education, things that often were overlooked, and if funding was going to be diminished in some way, shape, or form, those were the areas that seemed to be first on the list, and those would be first on his list to support. And we've continued that legacy for sure.
Well, certainly, yes. You've certainly followed in his footsteps, haven't you?
Well, you know, as a kid, I always said, I don't want to be quite like Dad, but when you work with him as many as you should work with him, and you realize what fundamentally a wonderful guy he was in so many ways, you're really grateful that you've turned out to be a little bit like him, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, that's a great tribute to him. We're very glad to be able to honor him on this show, and your work will continue on, as you said.
It will. Thank you very
much. All right,
Lynn.
take care, Dave. When we return, Sean will introduce us to George Harn, president of the College of Mary Magdalene in Warner. Don't go away. We'll be right back.